Hello, everyone. Welcome to TSAM Digital. My name is Anna, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Julian Trostinsky. He's the Director of Global Support and Business Development at Gresham Tech. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for being here, Julian. So before we get started on our conversation, I was wondering if you'd like to say a couple of words about yourself and about the work that you do at Gresham Tech.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my name is Julian Trostinsky, as you mentioned earlier. I've been with Gresham for about a year and a half, but I've been in the financial industry for almost 25 years. Majority of the time has been spent working in different capacities with different vendors. But I've also worked with large financial institutions globally where we've set up reconciliation services either for internal use or reconciliation shared services that is being leveraged in the industry externally. I've been working primarily with data for majority of that 25 years.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Julian. So to kick things off, in today's markets, what potential problems do financial institutions need to be prepared to deal with as they continue to grow their business?
Great question. So I would imagine that there are a few things that they would need to deal with, but if you think about it, in today's market, mainly financial institutions need to be prepared for anything, right? Including with continued growth of data volumes, complexities associated with the asset classes that they're working with and processing, the obligations that they've made internally and externally that have to do with complexity associated with reconciliations, complexity associated with corporate actions event, cash and liquidity management, ensuring that their billing and invoicing are done accurately, and generally staying on top of things like regulations, for example. All of these things are becoming increasingly complex in nature when it comes to financial industry, which also makes processing very time-consuming and costly, especially in today's shortage of talent within the industry. Additionally, I would imagine that financial institutions need to be prepared to meet these challenges despite dealing with few things. Some of the things that are probably worth mentioning would be lack of internal resources that understand the operational process end to end, even fewer resources who understand the underlying business associated with the processes that they're performing, lack of centralization and distributed teams performing repetitive processes are also important and they need to be addressed. I think that there is still in the world of, well, number one, 2023, number two, as much automation as there is in the financial industry, there's still an overwhelming amount of manual steps that are being performed within the industry that unfortunately carry a very high risk of errors in data processing, which also results in quite a lot of audit fines that unfortunately for the industry drives a tremendous amount of fines that are going out of this audit. And then finally, I guess the couple of things worth keeping in mind, you still have multitude of technologies that are being leveraged by financial industry that perform the same type of tasks. And most importantly, we still see quite a lot of ineffective management due to the lack of measurement capabilities within the solutions that they are leveraging. So I would probably say those are the type of problems that financial institutions need to be prepared to deal with as they grow their business.
This is really interesting. And I was curious to find out what would drive a financial institution to consider outsourcing. Is it the data volumes, the complexity of the data, shortage of talent, perhaps?
Okay, so another good question. I think prior to answering the outsourcing part of the question, it's probably worth covering what is the difference, let's say, between outsourcing and outsourcing to a managed service provider, because it's two different things. So for start is, what is the difference? When you outsource a functionality within your area to an external parties, you basically transfer the process as it stands right now onto someone else to perform it. If there are problems with the process, technically speaking, the obligation of that company to mitigate the problem or change the overall process may not exist. In a world of managed services, slightly different. When you outsource to a managed service provider, you are outsourcing to an area of experts or expertise that potentially changes your overall process and improves it from a point of view of a delivery. So you have more of a delivery-based outcome that guarantees a successful result opposed to a like-for-like outsourcing, just take my problems and deal with them yourself, right? As far as the considerations that one would need to make in order to consider or not consider something for outsourcing. So I would consider three main factors being considered. Number one, data volume, right? So it is a known fact that in the last 10 years within financial industry, the volumes of data hitting the industry has increased by a factor between 50 and 60. That's a significant growth. Additionally, we know that industry is continuing to experience the growth of data, and expectation that is by 2025, the data may grow by another 600%. So the volumes of data have grown and they will continue to grow, and it needs to be a part of the consideration when you are considering outsourcing. The second thing is regulatory changes. Regulatory changes that we've seen 10, 15, 20 years ago are very different than what we're seeing right now. They're becoming more and more complex in nature, and these changes are constant. They are regularly evolving and they're regularly changing. The industry needs to be prepared to keep up with these regulatory changes. And what we're seeing when an organization is looking to outsource, regulatory changes drive a certain component of that decision. And then finally, I would probably stick to the shortage of talent. I think that in the last many years, I would probably say 5 to 10 years, the financial industry has seen a tremendous shortage of talent within the organizations. It is becoming a major issue. And the fact that the industry must deal with the increasing demand related to continuous growth of data, constant regulatory changes, generally increased focus of managing the financial risk, the exposure of the financial industry. The challenge here is that this industry and the operational areas associated with the potential outsourced components still need to keep up, right? And if you are lacking knowledge internally and you are struggling with finding new, competent, talented resources, that's an issue. If components of the operational area specifically that would be outsourced to vendors such as Gresham, for example, where we do provide managed service for different organizations across different practices, it's definitely one of the reasons.
So prior to outsourcing, what internal analysis should a financial institution perform to determine what can be outsourced?
So it's not an easy task, I can tell you this, to make a decision on whether or not you want to outsource or you can outsource. But I would imagine prior to outsourcing, the organization needs to first determine what is it that they're trying to do, whether or not they're simply trying to go to a managed service provider or outsource a specific functionality within the industry. What they should also consider are a few factors. Number one, what is the main goal and the reason of your organization needing to outsource? And you need to look across your IT and business resources, whether or not there is shortage, whether or not there is adequate knowledge within the organization. The second thing is, are you trying to reduce costs, right? And what in most instances it comes down to that it is a reduction of cost that drives the entire process. But sometimes you see scenarios where an organization is trying to improve the overall performance of their operational process. Or are they, in some cases, they're trying to allow new strategic programs to be ran more internally, while a day-to-day activity may jeopardize that approach. So they're looking to outsource. The second thing is the components of an overall process that is being performed within the organization and what could be outsourced, right? For example, is it a matter of removing internal technical staff that covers the hardware needed to run certain processes, software that's running on top of the processes, and then the knowledge that will be associated or needed in order to satisfy the running of the certain solution within the organizational walls, right? Are you looking to outsource things like data collection and data normalization? Because as a vendor who does do that as a service, we see data collection, data validation, data normalization becoming increasingly the main driver behind certain outsourcing topics that are being considered. Are you sort of type of an organization who is tired of your IT department continuously being a delay in not being able to deliver certain business functions, right? We've seen that quite a lot. And then I think generally from the components outsourcing point of view, what is an overall process that you're looking to improve and how are you looking to improve? And then going slightly deeper into the outsourcing model is what change to an overall solution or the problem that you are trying to solve are you looking to become better in, and which of the components could be outsourced, right? Are you reviewing and analyzing your upcoming strategic goals for the organization? Are you facing, let's say, a certain delay in a delivery of certain functionality due to either lack of functionality within the software that's being leveraged or lack of the hardware that is available or could be available in order to deliver this functionality? So the general theme to outsourcing is it's a tedious but a necessary process that needs to be followed in order to determine within the financial industry or within the organization that you're representing whether or not outsourcing is the right solution for you.
And finally, I was wondering if has there been any case study done recently which you can share of a client who has outsourced their operations and the benefits gained?
So as a vendor producing or providing rather solutions to the industry for many, many years, we work very closely with all of our clients, and we do occasionally do case studies with them that demonstrate the benefits that they gain through the use of our solutions, our services, or a combination of both, right? I guess one of the most recent case studies that was done with an investment manager in North America. And this particular client, prior to outsourcing their reconciliation practice to Gresham, struggled with their overall process, starting with the small operations team that was responsible for reconciliations, relatively small and almost non-existent, to be honest with you, technology area that was continuously causing delays, starting with not having the right infrastructure, not truly understanding the software that's being used, not being able to support it, things of that nature. But most importantly, they struggled with their data, right? The data specifically from external sources that they internally really didn't understand. They struggled with collecting it. They struggled with normalizing it. So we stepped in and they basically outsourced through a managed service the components associated with running the reconciliation solution for them, being able to collect the data for them, being able to normalize the data for them, performing some of the reconciliation steps. And through outsourcing that to Gresham, what they managed to do is a few things. Number one, they managed to grow their business from 3 billion AUM to 107 billion AUM in less than, say, 10 years. And they did this while keeping the operations team relatively lean and efficient. They really didn't need to add additional operational staff. The same thing applies to reconciliations and data services. So they are now managing to take on more reconciliations. They collect much more data, and they are able to perform reconciliations through the use of Gresham's managed services BPO team in record time, right? So what they've done is initially they have been reporting that through initial outsourcing, the reduction in the overall reconciliation time has gone down by 60%. Through the constant evaluation of the way they perform things, their expectation that in the next few months, they're planning to reduce their current, 70 hours week went down to 30 hours week for reconciliations. And they're now looking to cut down that 30 hours per week by another 50%. And the key thing to keep in mind is that this client is a growing business. They're continuously scaling their data volumes. They're continuously scaling the asset classes that they're reconciling through the use of our technologies. And they're doing this for 55 different custodians without really any need for additional operational staff. That's the ultimate goal of what they were trying to do, and they're striving towards reaching more goals in this process.
This is really wonderful, Julian. I really appreciate you sharing your insight with us today. And I know our community of asset managers is always captivated and really interested to hear such wonderful insights. So thank you so much for sharing with us. We look forward to having you with us again soon. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Anna, for having me. And thank you for asking the right question. Thank you.